Before we begin our event, I would like to introduce our interpreters with Linguistica Interpretation, and we are going to launch both our Punjabi and Spanish translation rooms.
Thank you. Hola, muy buenas tardes a todos. Bienvenidos a la reunión. Para esta reunión vamos a tener interpretación simultánea a través de la reunión. Si usted desea utilizar la interpretación, en un momento usted va a ver un icono que parece un mundo abajo de su pantalla. Cuando usted vea el icono que parece un mundo, si está usando una computadora o si está usando un celular, van a ser los 3 puntitos a mano derecha inferior. Usted va a hacer clic ya sea a los 3 puntitos o al icono de mundo y va a seleccionar su lenguaje de preferencia. En este caso va a ser español. Y después de eso, le invito a poner el audio original en silencio o mute original audio para que de esta manera solamente escuche la presentación en su lenguaje de preferencia. Y por último, si está usando un diapositivo como un celular, no olvide oprimir finalizar para que se active la función. Le invitamos a someter cualquier pregunta o comentario en su lenguaje de preferencia. For all of our monolingual English-only speakers, if we do have any Spanish or Punjabi participants tonight, I do also invite you to select the interpretation icon. In a moment, you will see interpretation turn on. The feature will be at the bottom of your screen. It will be a world-like icon. You will select the world-like icon if you are on a device. If you are on a phone, it'll be the 3 little dots at the bottom right-hand corner. Once you select either option, you will select English and everything will be just as normal. But if we do have any comments, you will be able to hear the real live interpretation. Thank you. Paramjeet?
Yes, please. Hello.
Yes, you can go ahead and give instructions in
ਸਤਿ
Punjabi.
ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਜੀ, ਮੇਰਾ ਨਾਮ ਪਰਮਜੀਤ ਕੌਰ ਹੈ ਅਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਦੇ ਦੁਭਾਸ਼ੇ ਦੀਆਂ ਸੇਵਾਵਾਂ ਪ੍ਰਦਾਨ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਉਪਸਥਿਤ ਹੋਈ ਹਾਂ। ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਕੰਪਿਊਟਰ ਤੋਂ ਇਹ ਸਾਰੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਸੁਣ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਤਾਂ ਕੁਝ ਹੀ ਮਿੰਟਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੰਟਰਪ੍ਰੀਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਆਈਕਨ ਆ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਸਕਰੀਨ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਇੱਕ ਗਲੋਬ ਦੇ ਰੂਪ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਪਸਥਿਤ ਹੋਊਗਾ, ਜਿਸ ਨੂੰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਿਲੈਕਟ ਕਰਕੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਲੈਂਗੁਏਜ ਜਾਂ ਇੰਗਲਿਸ਼ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾਂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਿਲੈਕਟ ਕਰਕੇ ਮਨਚਾਹੀ ਭਾਸ਼ਾ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਨੂੰ ਦਾ ਅਨੁਵਾਦ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆ ਉਹ ਸੁਣ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ। ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਫੋਨ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਇਹ ਸਾਰਾ ਮੀਟਿੰਗ ਦੇਖ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਤਾਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ 3 ਛੋਟੀਆਂ ਡਾਟਸ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਆਉਣਗੀਆਂ, ਜਿਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇੰਗਲਿਸ਼ ਦਾ ਚੈਨਲ ਸਿਲੈਕਟ ਕਰਕੇ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਦੁਭਾਸ਼ਾ ਦੀਆਂ ਸੇਵਾਵਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ। ਸੋ ਸਾਰੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੇ ਦੌਰਾਨ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਲਾਈਵ ਇੰਟਰਪ੍ਰੀਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਆ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਉਹਦੀਆਂ ਸੇਵਾਵਾਂ ਦਾ ਆਨੰਦ ਮਾਣ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ। ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਜੀ।
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Translation has been launched. So now we will hop into the details of how you can engage with today's webinar. So as you probably can tell, your video and microphone is turned off if you're a participant. If you have any technical difficulties, issue hearing or seeing us, please use the chat feature and we will accommodate your questions as quickly as possible. We are going to have a Q&A time at the end of this webinar. So if during the course of the presentations, questions come up, please submit them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Those questions will be answered at the end of all of our speakers' presentations. And finally, this webinar is being recorded and will be made available on MAGSA's website and YouTube channel. With all of that, I'm going to turn it over to our General Manager, Matt Hurley, for our welcome and introductions.
Good afternoon and welcome to our 3rd annual Vision event for McMullen Area Groundwater Sustainability Agency. We are happy and proud to be here to interface with our landowners, interested parties, and those on the outside who just want to keep up with what MAGSA is up to. We're open and ready to do business always, and we're happy to have you here. We have coming up today a really good presentation. We have a full set of our team in-house and one by remote. And they're going to be going through and giving you a great update on what's happening in McMullen and what we have set up for you for 2023. So with that, you don't want to hear me anymore. We're going to hand it over to our famous GSP author and engineer extraordinaire, Lynn Groundwater Moeller, to talk about the expansion project. Lynn?
Yes. As Matt mentioned, my name is Lynn Groundwater Moeller, and I'm going to talk to you about the McMullen expansion project along with Erica, who is joining us remotely. So first, we'll start off with what progress we made in 2022. So last year, we held landowner meetings where we met with each individual landowner that had property along the McMullen expansion canal alignment that would be impacted by this project. During those meetings, we staked out the canal width so they could visually see the impact to their property. They could get a good idea of how many vines or how many trees they might have to remove for where the canal's situated on their property. And we also talked to them about where they would want their turnouts located so they could take water from the canal when that is made available to them. And also talk to them about where their facilities were, so we knew if anything had to be relocated, such as any water lines, main lines, what size diameter, what they were made out of, so we could take that into account in our design. And so after those meetings, we were able to bring the design to 90%. And so any changes that were identified in the field, we made those changes to the 90% drawings. And we also talked with utility companies to make sure we knew where all the utilities were located and what might have to get relocated, along with verifying the utility locations through potholing. And now Erica will give a little update on the environmental side for 2022.
Great, thank you, Lynn. I think we're still staying on the previous slide for the moment. Thank you. So I'm Erica Ansel with Tetra Tech, as Lynn mentioned. We've been assisting MAGSA with preparation of the environmental documents for this project and made some good progress in 2022. So during the last year, we cleared a major hurdle by completing the CEQA process, which included preparing the draft CEQA document, circulating it for public review, addressing comments, and producing a final document. The final CEQA document was formalized by the Fresno County Recorder in summer of 2022. We've also been working with Phil Bichand and the Natural Resources Conservation Service, so NRCS, to prepare the combined draft watershed plan and environmental assessment, which includes planning, environmental analysis, and economic analysis in a single document that is in review with NRCS headquarters as we speak. We anticipate getting NRCS's comments and producing the public draft of the watershed plan environmental assessment in the spring of 2023. We have also applied for a stream bed alteration agreement from CDFW for the expansion project and expect that to be finalized over the next few months. Onto our last bullet here, one of our other accomplishments that is applicable to most of the MAGSA area was to prepare models showing groundwater movement under various recharge scenarios. These models will inform the placement of recharge areas and recovery wells as MAGSA completes planning and design for its various projects. And back to Lynn for the next slide.
Yes, so now that we've gone over what happened in 2022, what's coming in 2023? So this year, we will be completing the design through 100% and getting bid documents ready. And just as a reminder, this project does have 2 grants available that we are using. So there's a state and federal grant. For the federal grant, the NRCS grant, we do have to meet their standards and deadlines. And so bringing the design up to 100% is also making sure we meet the NRCS standards. And as you can see on the right-hand side of the slide is the schedule for the design being complete in summer, fall of this year, with the bidding process starting in the fall and construction starting later this year, fall, winter timeline. And this is to accommodate the deadline of NRCS with their portion of the canal being done by August 2024. And the funds that NRCS will be put towards is the second half of the earthwork for the canal. So the project may go past the August 2024 deadline, such as the pump stations and road crossings, but that earthwork for the second half of the canal needs to be completed by August 2024 to be in compliance with the NRCS grant funding. So that's a brief overview of the timeline for the project, and Erica will finish off with an update on the environmental.
Sure. So addressing items 2 and 3 here. As I mentioned earlier, we do hope to circulate the draft watershed plan and environmental assessment for a 30-day public review and comment period this spring of 2023. The release of the document will be publicized by our wonderful team of public outreach specialists who are with us today, and will be made available on MAGSA's website during the public review period. Once the review period is complete and we've received comments, we will address those comments and finalize the watershed plan environmental assessment, a step which is planned to occur this summer 2023 to support that design schedule, as Lynn discussed. And with that, I will turn it over to Terry to talk about Aquaterra.
Okay, thank you very much. This is Terry Earlywine of Provo and Pritchard. I'm going to describe the Aquaterra water bank. Some of you may not be that familiar with what a water bank involves, and the idea of a water bank is that you use the groundwater storage capacity similar to the way you would use a surface reservoir. So you put water in wet periods when it's available, and then take it out in dry periods. The thing that is somewhat unique about a water bank is that it involves agencies that have water that may not be from the local area that would provide water for into the bank. And then they would input water in wet years, take it out in dry years. To function as a water bank, an area needs to have some storage capacity. So it needs to have some empty groundwater storage space. An area also needs to ideally have good surface soils, sandy soils that can take recharge in recharge basins or on farm in on farm recharge. It needs good water quality, and it also needs connections with conveyance facilities in the area. And the Aquaterra water bank is ideally suited for all of these characteristics. It's one of the few areas on the east side of the valley where you have good quality water and good surface soils that has a connection to conveyance on the west side of the valley on the California Aqueduct and Delta Mendota Canal. So that's really why we're in a fortunate position to develop this project. The participants in this project would be agencies that really could be anywhere. They could be local. A lot of them could be from outside of the area agencies such as State Water Project contracting districts and Central Valley Project contracting districts on the west side. And they would all fund a share of new facilities to develop this project. This figure shows the facilities that we're proposing to develop. And this is showing that we would have pumping plants up in the upper left-hand corner of this figure off of Mendota Pool. Those pumping plants could take water from the Mendota Pool that comes from the Delta Mendota Canal. They would pump it east through the new canals that are shown in this map into recharge basins, and that would be recharged. And then in dry years, that would happen in wet years. In dry years, that water would be pumped back to Mendota Pool, and then it would be exchanged back to the participants. The benefit to the participants is they get to store water that they have contracted for that they can't use immediately in wet years, but they get to pull it back in dry years. The benefit for MAGSA's landowners is that they have a lot of facilities that aren't going to be used much of the time. And they can be used for local recharge. They can also be used for projects that involve water banking that have a leave behind percentage. So it's a classic win-win project for participants and local agencies. Next slide. So for the progress for 2022, the big accomplishment we had was completing the feasibility report that describes this project, and that was something that we could start making available to potential participants and to local agencies. There was a participation agreement that was drafted by Matt together with the attorneys, and that's been provided to potential program participants. That participation agreement provides that they would provide funding for the project on a schedule, and then they would participate in how the program's developed. And the third accomplishment is that we've been having ongoing outreach to potential program participants. We've talked to a number of water agencies that are interested in this project, and they've responded to their questions and kept in contact with them. pending the release of the environmental impact material. Next slide. So for 2023, what our tasks are is, first one is to complete the environmental assessment initial study that defines the environmental effects of the project, which are mostly positive. Second thing is to get commitments from potential project participants. So these would be water districts, either local or outside of the area. Third thing is to get agreements with project stakeholders. So agencies, local water agencies that could be affected by the project. We would come up with agreements with them ahead of time to streamline the project implementation. Last thing we would do in 2023 is, pending the commitments from the project participants, is we would get started on the project design and get that moving and start thinking about how we're going to be constructing the project. So with that, I'm finished with the Aquaterra project and turn it over to Phil to talk about On-Farm Recharge University.
Hi, I am Phil Bashon with Bashon Associates. I have been working throughout this area for over a decade now in developing and implementing on-farm recharge throughout the region. And today I'm going to be talking about On-Farm Recharge University, or OFRU. We're really excited about this endeavor and effort here at MAGSA. Here we want our landowners to be the smartest, most successful and educated OFR practitioners statewide. This region has been a pioneer in this practice, and to my knowledge, our OFR program is the largest and most promising worldwide. We know in these changing times that water uncertainty is a major issue for farmers. There's sustainability and their success. As you know, MAGSA is working hard to reduce that uncertainty, both as related to SGMA, but also through increasing opportunities for everyone. So for that reason, MAGSA has made OFR and OFRU a priority to be successful in implementing the McMullen on-farm recharge projects, which Lynn and Erica talked about, and the Aquaterra Water Bank, which Terry talked about. MAGSA needs strong, effective landowner partnerships that can help in successfully implementing an effective and responsible OFR program. Our goal with OFRU is that it be a cornerstone of the program, in which we're helping landowners plan on how, when, and where to implement OFR in an effective, efficient, responsible way that brings a return on investment to not only MAGSA, but to the partnering landowners as well. Moreover, OFR is an important component for flood management, and we haven't talked about that today, but we have a lot of local communities that are at risk from flooding that lie along the Kings and San Joaquin rivers. Historically, they've had very large losses. So these communities have been at risk in the past and will face increased risk in the future. And OFR is an important element to reducing flood risk and flood costs for those communities. Cohort 0 has been our first run at OFRU. We have lots of partners who have helped us put together the program. This includes UC Davis, Lawrence Berkeley Lab, NRCS, DWR, and Central Valley Regional Board. Together, we have developed a curriculum over 6 workshops. We've had field trips, which provide tangible examples of on-farm recharge and help landowners explore the constraints, opportunities, and strategies for implementing. We have developed a lot of public-facing materials for these workshops. This includes reports, guidelines, instructional and informational videos, and we're also developing an OFR web tool to help at field and farm scale planning for on-farm recharge. So throughout this, we're working hard to build our OFR community. And I'm now going to give it to Rebecca Quist to talk about 2023.
Phil. So I've had the pleasure of working alongside Phil, Ashley, Brianna, of course, under the guidance and support of Matt and the others in the room. Those other partners that Phil mentioned, our guest speakers at the OFRU workshops. generous hosts like Don Cameron, who's the MAGSA board chair, as well as a local grower, on designing and helping execute this program to empower landowners with education and therefore leading to confidence in adopting this practice. So it's been very exciting, as Phil mentioned, and we'll be graduating our first ever cohort 0, in the spring of 2023. So these will be the latest trainees in the MAGSA area on-farm recharge. They're living among you. Take their word for it. If you're not sure about cohort U, hopefully you can connect with one of them at some point and talk about it. Building up from ground 0, we plan on launching cohort 1, which was actually our second cohort, but our first was kind of a pilot getting things off the ground. So our next cohort, we're calling cohort 1. If you're interested in joining a future cohort, you're a MAGSA grower, we encourage you to email ofr@mcmullenarea.org, which I know Brianna is going to drop into the chat right now, to express your interest in a future cohort. We'll maintain a list of folks as we proceed on recruitment down the road on this program. And for those who are not quite sure that you want to dive all the way into a cohort experience, 6 workshops, field trip, site visit, that sounds like a little too much, but you're interested in the topic, you want to learn, you want to engage. We'd like to make opportunities for the broader public to learn about OFR topics. So we'll be integrating a webinar series during the time frame of the next cohort that will be open to the public to talk about OFR successes, some challenges and some learnings, as well as emerging opportunities for the OFR practice. In addition to that, as Phil mentioned, we've been developing a YouTube video library with video shorts on key OFR topics that really drill down into some specifics. They're short videos, but they might answer a specific question that you have. If you're thinking about implementing OFR and you have a barrier of some kind, we hope that this resource library can be a place that you can come quickly find an answer to your question so that you can take the steps necessary. And those are on MAGSA's YouTube channel. They're really open to anyone, designed for MAGSA growers, but we encourage anyone to go take a look at those as well. So that's all I have on OFR. And I'm going to pass it off to Randy Hopkins to talk about the revised groundwater sustainability plan.
So in 2022, there was quite a bit of work. So if you remember, we submitted our GSP in January of 2020. DWR took 2 years to review that and get comments back to us and gave us a short 6 months to get those turned around. But in January 22, we did get the comments back from DWR. We were deemed incomplete, as well as many other agencies in the Central Valley and in the Kings Subbasin in particular. But the comments really consisted of DWR wanting the Kings Basin to be a little bit more consistent among the GSAs on how they handle things. And then specific to MAGSA, the main comment was addressing our subsidence criteria, again, being consistent with some of the other folks that are dealing with subsidence, but then looking at the interconnected surface water along the San Joaquin River. And so part of what we're doing over the next year is to go to the next slide. Yep, there we go. We're going to be looking at a lot of additional work just to analyze those interconnected surface waters and gather data to kind of fill in the data gaps that we identified in the original GFP and the revisions. So continue monitoring of groundwater levels, continue data gathering, and then a lot of good work is going on with all the projects, and we're going to continue to develop projects and get those going. So in Matt's word, the plan is working, work the plan. So. Oh. I'll hand it over to Matt now. Sorry, I missed my cue.
Well, I'm back. Of course, with all the good that you just heard about comes a price tag. If you all recall back in 2018, McMullen decided the best way to pay for all of the planning and design work that we had that is now coming to fruition was to adopt or ask the landowners of McMullen to adopt a Proposition 218 consideration for $19 per acre as the pool from which all of these improvements would be paid for in terms of their design, et cetera. At the time, we didn't really know how much it was going to cost. We didn't really know how extensive it was going to be. We've managed, happily so, I'm happy to report that we've managed over the first 4.5 years to stay well within that budget and maintain that without having to come back and ask for any more money from our landowners. As we finish what is essentially the 5th evolution of the property tax collection of that $19 an acre, we have to anticipate what we will do for the next stage. So in 2020, where am I? Props. Okay, we got that. So in 2023, you can read that. I don't need to look at it. In 2023, we plan on essentially recreating the same process. We'll be renewing the $19, or we'll be asking the landowners most likely to renew the $19 per acre. That'll be based upon an analysis by an independent analyst to make sure that all of our proposed budgetary considerations over the next 5 years are reasonable and qualifying for a beneficial assessment. And we will bring that to our landowners through public meetings over the next couple of months. If you take a quick look around the rest of the world since 2018, you'll find out that some pretty high numbers have been put forth as required to meet Sigma requirements. I'm happy to report again that for today, it looks like we'll be looking perhaps at $19 going forward, and we will do everything we can in the MAGSA office to try to reduce that as time goes by and save our landowners some money. Now, how will we pay for that water bank and how will we pay for some of these other things? We will ask some of our participating partners to actually partner with us on the financial side as well. And it's our intention to try to keep the costs for our actual individual landowners to a minimum. So with that, you can anticipate probably in the April timeline, hearing from us again. The board will get a monthly report about the 218 process, and all of the folks who dial in for the board meetings will be kept up to date as well. So hopefully, cross our fingers and hope for the best. We will not find anything that tells us that $19 is too much or too little, and we'll settle on that come along July or so, and we'll move forward. So that's the bad news for today. Not really bad news, actually good bad news. I'm happy to report that we're not going to make it any worse than it's been already, and hopefully you don't think it's been too painful. So I think that's everything that I have here. I think you can see it all. We are quick approaching the fun part of this venture, the Q&A panel, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the guests have to ask and what some of the questions might be.
Thank you, Matt. So if through these excellent presentations you've come up with any questions, now's the time to submit them using the Q&A feature. But before we address any of those questions, we have a few people who pre-submitted their questions. These are our high achievers, and I'm going to read them off, and our team is going to respond to them. So our first question is, will there be any pumping restrictions in Mid-Valley Water District until 2040? If so, what are those limitations per year?
So I think talking with Matt and looking back at our plan, I think we're not looking at any restrictions until, or allocations, I guess, until 2030 at least. And so part of this is getting a good assessment of where we are, but also working on developing some of these other projects to see what those allocations or potential restrictions might be. So more to come on that as we get a little bit more information and a little further down the road on some of these projects.
Thanks, Mandy. You want to add to that, Matt?
I just say agreed. The plan is written in such a way that pumping restrictions and allocations both are not intended to be used as a solution for the Sigma issues unless and until we've been unsuccessful in additional resource management and efficiencies, increasing efficiencies a la on-farm recharge university, metering, algorithm-driven efficiencies in orchards, all those kind of things. We're rapidly attempting to get our folks in MAGSA as efficient as we possibly can to cut down on any potential wasted water use. I am happy to report again, one of those happy to report moments again for the general manager, that as we do our analysis, we found that we have very little in terms of waste within MAGSA, and that's a happy situation to have, that we aren't having water being put to uses that are not beneficial.
Thank you, Matt. Our second question is, I'm brainstorming the possibilities of different uses for my land in the next 5 years. Does MAGSA have any suggestions, grants, etc., that might help or guide me toward one direction or the other?
I guess that's me. My MAGSA, I'm one with the name closest to it. The answer is yes. I think the market, farmers famously rely on the market largely for a lot of those decisions. But in terms of crops that require certain quantities of water, that's definitely going to be an important question to consider. Some of them are easier to manage over a shorter period of time. I say shorter period of time, meaning that almonds perhaps are a 20-year crop roughly, as compared to pistachios that may be an 80 to 100-year crop, and or vines that may happen to fall in the middle. As Sigma progresses and as the picture becomes clearer in our Sigma crystal ball, I think that we'll be able to better advise on that. I think the best advice that I give most of the farmers who have taken me up on my offer to give me a call in my office and chat about it for their particular parcel is to, if there's any doubt in their minds, is to plant perhaps at 80% of what they could plant rather than going wall to wall on a particular parcel, giving themselves some room for flex in the event that things turn out better or worse than we hoped. And that way they can add trees and not have to take away trees or vines as they plan. So that's generally it. There's no right or wrong answer on that, but I think the best offer of advice to any of our landowners is always gather as much information as is available to you before you order your trees, vines, or other crops for planting. I think that's the smartest thing to do, and we're happy to help in informing on that whenever we're asked.
Thank you. Okay, our last pre-submitted question is, what is the impact of the recent rain and snow on MAGSA and other nearby agencies' projects? How has it changed the water table?
That's probably me too. Happy to answer that. It's a little bit intuitive, and it's fairly obvious that even in this region where we only get perhaps 10 or 12 inches of rainfall for a whole year, having what we've had in the last 30 days or so has been critically important in kind of stemming the negative tide of the drought. The soil has happily welcomed most of the rain. It's actually puddled in some areas. That's something we haven't seen for a while. And obviously it will ultimately help the aquifer and help the water supply. Unfortunately, water moves slowly through the soil. And so even the best of recharge efforts are just a beginning spot for ultimately where the water will end up in our aquifers. And so we can't expect that they will jump up in any radical, the elevations will jump up in any radical manner, but they clearly will be coming back the right direction rather than the wrong direction, which is down rather than up. All good. In the area for MAGSA, no one's noticed, of course, any water in the bypass because the Pine Flat Lake area has been refilling and has not reached, currently has not reached a point where they had to vacate any space within the reservoir for any flood reservation. That may be coming relatively soon, depending on how many more rainstorms we have. But the snowpack is truly the best thing that's happened to the state of California and to the southern end of the Sierra since these storms began, because it's sitting at approximately 240% of normal and about 120% of the water content for a normal April 1, which is kind of our break point for how we feel about how our water supply is doing for the following year. And that bodes very well for water supply for the coming year. We always are concerned. That's why there's space reserved in the reservoirs, because if a warm rain comes or a warm streak comes and that snow comes too quickly, we have to manage that extra water, and it could turn into a flood situation even at that point. But for right now, all flags are green in McMullen. All flags are generally green within Fresno County proper. There are some places in the state where, of course, the rain was a problem and caused some flooding and some damage. But we're happy again to report that locally we are doing pretty doggone well with the situation as it came down. Anybody else wants to give their point of view, that's fine too.
It's just years like this, you want to have that infrastructure in place in case there is flood water to put the water within MAGSA. So it's good to see that the projects are moving forward within MAGSA to, in the future, when we do have a rain event and flood water, if it becomes available to MAGSA, we'll have a place to put it.
Yeah, I guess my favorite saying in these types of conditions is, if ifs and buts were candy and nuts, so what a party we could have. I hear people saying, well, if we'd only put, additional infrastructure in 5 years ago, we could be catching this water, and similar commentary. And of course, everybody's throwing their hands up and just fretting about the fact that water is going out through the Golden Gate into the Pacific Ocean. But rest assured that everything we've talked to you about today, as part of our Sigma planning and part of our planning for our MAGSA landowners and local control, is dedicated towards being ready the next time and not just talking about it. So we're really, really happy to be here to talk to you about that today, for sure.
Well, I'll add one more thing to that, in that having these storms come by brings attention to the opportunity again. And so every time you can have attention to the opportunity for improving the water situation, capturing it through recharge, whether it's a conveyance limited system or socially limited system, that's always a good thing, because it helps keep the wheels of progress moving.
Absolutely.
Well said, Phil. Well, I'm going to turn it over to
I see 6.
Becca to share some of our questions that have been submitted. And if you still have questions, we have some time, so feel free to continue submitting those.
All right, so looks like some questions came up, which is great. Following the presentations from our speakers. First question is from Jerry Rye. What is the annual capacity of the Aquaterra water bank?
The Aquaterra, the project's being developed to have 800,000 acre feet of storage space, which is larger amount of storage than is behind Millerton Reservoir. The way the project's been designed is that we've got something like 130,000 acre feet, I believe, of recharge capability. So the conveyance into the project, the recharge basins are designed for roughly about 130,000 acre feet of recharge capability on a defined 6-month pattern. That actually could be quite a bit more, probably double that if you had water year round. And then it's got about 140,000 acre feet of extraction capability. So can't put all the water in to fill it up completely in 1 year, can't take it all out in 1 year. It takes about 4 or 5 years to fill it up, it takes 4 or 5 years to empty it.
I'm gonna bet you, Terry, that we can put just a little bit over 200,000 acre feet of water in there anytime we want to recharge in there, and we'll try to get as much out of there as we can. Like Terry said, it's our intention to get as much in as possible. Based upon the current offering of the 800,000 acre feet, it would be a little over a 4-year effort of really wet years to try to fill it up. We do have additional space beneath MAGSA that has not been included in the current offering and hopefully will be available to us in future offerings. We believe there's a substantial amount of water storage below us, approaching possibly as much as the capacity for San Luis Reservoir, but only time will tell, and we'll take things slowly and take our first 800,000 acre feet and get it in there. And that will be a really good test and very positive test, I think, because models are showing us that we'll be happily putting in more in the future, once we take care of our priority partners.
And that's really the goal of the water bank, is that it provides a guaranteed amount for the participants, so they make sure that they're taken care of, and then it provides all this other capability for MAGSA to use for its own benefits. So that's really what the purpose is for MAGSA.
Absolutely. And of course, Lynn, the expansion project, and Phil, that's more of a flood control project, but certainly those waters, when they're available, will be part of the on-farm recharge process, and hopefully will be additive to whatever the water bank operates during those wet years as well. So we'll be trying to squeeze as much in as we can, Jerry, and ideally, I'd like to think the number's closer to 2 million that we'd like to put in there over time, and boy, would I be happy for that to occur, and I think most everybody in the region will be happy for that to occur as well.
Well, and there's also this synergy between the on-farm recharge and the recharge basins. For the water bank, we have a few thousand acres of recharge basins that we defined as recharge basins. For the water bank, we'll have somewhere equivalent in on-farm recharge areas as well. And those areas could be leveraged as well to increase the capacity for the water bank if needed.
Suffice it to say, it's not a small amount of water, and it will make a substantial impact on the overdraft in the King Subbasin.
And we thank everyone for its location.
Yes. Turns out location worked out for MAGSA. How about that?
So question from an anonymous attendee, Bill, for your ears. Is flood water being looked into? If so, is there any money from the state to pay for it?
So the on-farm recharge program that we're talking about is a flood water program. So on-farm recharge started here about 12 years ago, and it was one of the drivers behind flood water becoming a poster boy for the Department of Water Resources to help stabilize California's water situation. So yes, it is flood water is being implemented in this area. It's being implemented through the on-farm recharge program. We have 2 grants right now that are essentially both floodwater grants. We have the grant from the original grant that put together phase 1 was a flood corridor grant from DWR. And the current grant, which is a federal grant that we're using on the expansion project, is an NRCS RCPP grant. And that actually is a recharge grant. And then the third grant is a state water board grant, which is a stormwater grant. So the state water board grant and the original flood corridor grant are both flood water grants effectively.
And the important part of that question is that, yes, we will continue at every opportunity to seek state or federal funding or local funding to assist us in any way we think we can make it work to accelerate and expedite the getting of water into the ground for the benefit of the region and the basin.
And one other thing, I guess, is that we have equip in this area, and a lot of that equip is about grants for implementing on-farm recharge at the landowner level. So
yeah, what Phil's referring there to is NRCS National Resources Conservation Service EQIP Environmental Quality Improvement Program grants that are made to the individual landowners. Hopefully, each of our landowners has received a substantial amount of information from our crack outreach team over the last few months, encouraging the application to the NRCS for EQIP funding. We have the great pleasure of working with NRCS, and as a result of our relationship, we were successful in getting a series of $1 million per year EQIP funding opportunities for our landowners over the next 4 years. And we just finished educational and outreach tranche that allowed for our folks to come in and discuss directly with the NRCS personnel on how to make the best and most effective applications. We'll be doing that again as we go forward in this year and in subsequent years. And hopefully we'll be able to completely use up our $1 million and more that's made available to us to help on efficiencies and other water projects. Did I say that right, ladies?
Perfect.
Got to get the advertising in there. That was a commercial.
Flawless. A question from Katie, what are your current plans to require or purchase flow meters?
That's pretty simple. One of the first actions the board of directors took as a policy direction is to enact a policy which requires that every production groundwater well pumping more than 2 acre-feet per year be equipped with an electromagnetic meter by 2025. So that means for the next 2 years or into 2025, as appropriate, we're asking all of our landowners to provide for qualifying electromagnetic meters on their wells. It's also hopeful that each of them will be tied to appropriate telemetry, which will greatly reduce the amount of time and personnel necessary to read those meters, and that telemetry will report to a data management system that we're working with a data management contractor who will be able to provide continuous data management for us as a third-party vendor. The cost for those things will depend on the size of your discharge. Generally, most of the suppliers of those qualifying electromagnetic meters can help all of our landowners out with that. But we're also have made series of applications to the Bureau of Reclamation under their Water Smart program for assistance in acquiring those meters. Right now, we have a pending $2.8 million grant request into the Bureau. We expect to hear back from the Bureau on that water and energy efficiency grant sometime in the next probably 60 days or so. We're hopeful that on our 4th try, you don't always get these things, on our 4th try that we've refined our presentation to the point where it will satisfy the Bureau's needs and will qualify us with enough points that we can have that money available. What we hope to do with that money is to assist the landowners, whether you've already purchased it in the form of a reimbursement, or if you have not purchased yet, in the form of participation with the landowners in getting those meters on. Again, trying to keep the overall cost of Sigma compliance at the lowest we possibly can for our landowners in the process.
So this one comes from an anonymous attendee. When will reimbursements for landowners be awarded to those along the canal alignment?
The canal alignment, I'm presuming that the reimbursements we're talking about is at least compensation rather than reimbursement. Our canal alignments, the first, as Lynn had indicated, our first project, it's a little bit ahead of the water bank, is the expansion project. And in order to build the expansion project, we will be constructing canals as has been described. And those canals are not spud ditches by any means. The canal easements are about 125 feet wide. I say this only to kind of bring the rest of the landowners up to speed on the conversations we've had with those who are adjacent to the canal alignments. And the idea there would be, rather than buying the land or taking the land from the landowners, we have no interest in that. In fact, in an ultimate allocation process for groundwater, we want to make sure those landowners continue to own the land that the canals will be going on. But we'll ask for easements for those canals. And as part of that process, we've been out, we've visited each affected parcel. We've discussed with the landowners what the effect on those parcels may be. Right now, we've had preliminary property valuations done by a third-party appraiser. We are now working on the part that's a little slower and a little harder sometimes to assess, and that is the value of the crop that may be affected, or the capital infrastructure that may be affected by the actual canal alignment. We are definitely working through that. And of course, as has been indicated, we're chomping at the bit, at least I am. I don't know if you can tell. Anytime you see me, I'm wanting to go to work. And these folks in this room know I'm chomping at the bit to get this done, but we can't go to construction, nor can we really finish up the negotiations with our landowners until we finish this environmental review process, because there's a proper order to do things and we don't want to get ahead of ourselves and get out of order. So we will be in contact with our landowners that we've spoken with in the past very soon and finalizing those numbers. And as we finance the project, then we will make those payments in advance. Obviously, we need to get proper documents recorded, et cetera, allowing us to have the ability to do that. And of course, we want the permissions of our landlord or of our landowners, not a hostile environment. So that's the description for at least where we are with respect to the expansion project. As for the water bank, as a matter of fact, Lynn and I and Randy, I think tomorrow morning will be out quite early and continuing to drive along the proposed right-of-ways to try to identify well sites, telephone poles, housing, any infrastructure, types of crops, et cetera, that will affect the other approximately 60 miles of canals that will be necessary to construct the water bank. And we're in that phase right now of identifying not only what's in those right-of-ways, but which right-of-ways might be better relocated to another location. So as far as those who saw perhaps their property close by one of the colored lines on Terry's map about the water bank, we should be in contact with you fairly soon to talk to you about the same considerations relative to placement of the water bank canals on your property for construction as part of the water bank. Last but not least, we will have some areas that Phil described as our direct recharge areas where we intend to bring water in from the outside, direct it into a certain location and put it into ponding areas, spreading basins for the purpose of recharge. Those two will be negotiated with those landowners once those areas have been further defined. And those will include a number of considerations that I'll throw out there for anybody who might be talking about this in the future. The most important of which is clearly permanent crops will not be encouraged at that, but it'll be annual crops and those which are much more flexible, so that in the event that there are rain events and water events that we need to bring the water in, we'll be able to do that without harming any of the crops. So that's a long answer to a very short question, but it's coming. And of course, money is required for that. And we're working through that process as well as we develop the dollars necessary to compensate those landowners. Did I do okay?
It was so thorough, there's no.
Yeah, they all left and there's nobody left. The participants are all gone and they all went home. They're having dinner about this point in time. Okay, I get it.
This is probably another one for you, Matt. What is the current status of the pumps along McMullen Grade that James owns? When will that stop or reimbursements begin for the water they pump out of MAGSA?
I wonder who could be answering that question. I'm not going to call you out, Danny. Okay. The pumps along McMullen Grade belong to James Irrigation District. And for those of you who perhaps really don't know the story about that, prior to MAGSA becoming an entity, long before MAGSA became an entity, around 1920, as a matter of fact, the James Irrigation District was granted an easement across the properties over which the canals and the pumps are located for the purpose of really drawing down what was too high a water table at the time. In the 1920s, there were artesian wells and there were swampy conditions in McMullen. That's most of the reason that the FID and consolidated western boundaries are where they are, because they saw no need to incorporate a swamp into their different districts. So James continues to operate those wells under the permissions that were granted to them under that easement. We are working really hard with James. They're a potentially fantastic partner. So far, our negotiations with them have been really productive, and we're looking forward to perhaps coming up with alternatives to pumping in those precise locations that can help us collectively, James and ourselves, manage the water in that area better, perhaps improve the water quality in that area for James and for us, and come up with a different mousetrap for satisfying James and MAGSA's needs without having to run those locations any further. So stand by. We're not there yet, but we're actively and productively and positively negotiating with James towards that end.
All right, there's no more open questions, but we do still have time. So here's Matt where you get to fill in and wait for the questions.
Start tap dancing on the table. This is where we, I knew it. See, this is where we always get one. The person's been holding that question the whole time. I'm ready. They don't want to see me tap dance.
Okay, so question is, with PG&E prices going up this year again, will MAGSA be putting in solar fields along the main canals to help lower the cost of electricity?
Well, I like how you speak prospectively of, are we going to put solar panels along our canals? We have taken into account the energy needs along our canals as we construct them. There are approximately 26, I think at this point, or 27 anticipated lift stations that are required to move the water around under the water bank plan that Terry explained to you. And each of them has different types of motors to drive the pumps that are keenly focused towards energy savings and qualifications with the air board. Each source of energy, of course, has a different impact on the air quality, and we need to make sure through Tetra Tech and through our environmental documents that we properly plan for that. Currently, we plan on having 3 electric motors and 3 either propane or natural gas driven motors on each of the pump station, 6 obviously, approximately 36 cubic feet per second of pumping capacity, getting us to about a 300 to 400 cubic foot per second capacity and pumping at maximum. But yes, the answer is that we will have to work with PG&E. We do have natural gas pipelines in the area, which is helpful. We'll be working with Southern California Gas. We'll be working with all the utilities to try to maximize the ability to take advantage of what they have. And of course, we wouldn't do anything without proper consideration at the time of construction for solar as an alternate power source during the day at least, and possibly including the consideration of proper storage for that power in the evenings. Hope that answers the question. Still there? Anybody go away? Anybody else?
No open questions,
But 3 minutes.
we do have 3 minutes.
3 minutes?
Yeah.
I'm gonna talk a little bit. When you get tired of hearing me, and that won't take long. You can fire another question at us. There's no such thing as a dumb question, by the way. I always say that, and I mean it. Hopefully, if we don't have the answer, we'll get it for you. But I will summarize what we've done today in a very positive vein. I am happy and proud to be the general manager of McMullen. I'm happy to work with the people in this room and the people at the staffs that represent the support for them. We've made fantastic progress over the last 4 years or so, and we intend to make even greater progress as we move forward. As I indicate in all of my reports to the board each month, and in asking what the state of the district is or the state of the agency is, the state of the agency is excellent. And the projects are excellent, the progress is excellent, the staff and support are excellent, our landowners are excellent. I happen to believe, slightly biased, that there's no better place to be managing groundwater going into the future in the King Subbasin than in McMullen. So I'll throw down the gauntlet to all the rest of the GSAs within the subbasin and say, hey, let's work together and make sure King Subbasin's #1 in sustainability. I do believe we'll get there. I believe we can actually beat the 2040 deadline, but I don't want to get too brash. So with that, I would say over and out. Anybody else have anything they want to contribute? All right. We'll see you. We're not going anywhere. Come visit us, 275 South Madera Avenue, number 301. I'm always there. I'm always by myself in there. So come in and see if you can keep me from talking to the walls, which I do quite often. Look forward to it. Thanks all.